Dallas-Fort Worth, are you ready to learn how we do a quick property rehab cost assessment before we actually make an offer on a home? Join me in this unique Inside the Deal training video as we're going to give you insight into two properties that we currently own and do a comparison of this property in White Settlement and also coming to you from this recent purchase here in Northeast Dallas, about 5 minutes from Right Rock Lake. Hey, it's Michael Williams from Let'sGetPaid.com. Join me on another double journey into Dallas-Fort Worth off-market real estate and learn how you can be a real estate investor too. Now everybody knows how I love me a broken down house that I can buy at a discount. But what I don't love are unexpected surprises when I start my rehab. Surprises that could really drive up my rehab costs and could ultimately be impactful enough for me to lose money on a deal. So in this video, what we're going to do is show you how we do an initial property condition assessment once we come out and see a home for the first time. And we look at some of the big cost drivers that could really impact your rehab budget. And we talked about this in previous videos. Those big cost drivers are the foundation, the roof, the plumbing, the electrical system, and the HVAC system. And in this video, we're particularly going to pay close attention to how you assess plumbing, how you assess the electrical system, and how you assess the foundation. And we're going to do that by comparing this house that we bought in White Settlement side by side with this house that we bought in Northeast Dallas. So to give you insight in the process we use for this initial property assessment, we're going to look at this house. It was built in 1984. It's here in White Settlement, Texas. It's got 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and it's about 1,100 square feet. And we're going to compare it to this home in Northeast Dallas. This home was built in 1982. It has 1,290 square feet. It's a little bit bigger. It has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. Now, if you compare these homes side by side, you'll notice that the home in White Settlement looks like it might be in a little bit better as-is condition. But this video is about teaching you how to do that initial rehab assessment and making sure that you look for those hidden surprises that can drive up your cost. Now, when you're buying an older home, 1960s, 1970s, anything that was built prior to 1980, one of the first things that you want to check out is whether the home was built with cast iron plumbing. Cast iron plumbing can cause you a lot of problems, and many times in these older homes, we've actually had to replace the entire plumbing infrastructure. So one of the first things you want to do is check and see if the cast iron is in place, and most probably it will already have started eroded, it may already have leaks, and most probably if you have to adjust the foundation, it is going to have problems and actually fail. Now I know it sounds crazy, but one of the fastest ways you can determine if the home has a cast iron plumbing infrastructure is by looking at the roof. You can tell by looking at the pressure vents that are on top of the roof that aid in removing air from the plumbing system. And if those pressure vents on top of the roof are made of iron, you know you have a cast iron plumbing infrastructure. If the pipe is white coming out of the roof, or if you can tell that it's plastic, it means that you have a PVC plumbing infrastructure in most cases, and the home is less likely to have plumbing problems. Or if you need to make a foundation adjustment, it's less likely that the PVC pipe infrastructure is going to fail on you. So let's go ahead and take a look at the roof here in Northeast Dallas, and you can see here that our pressure ventilation pipes coming out of the roof are brown, and they've got kind of a mushroom top over it. And you've got to kind of get used to looking at these houses and get some experience, but those are PVC pipes up there. And usually PVC pipes coming out of the roof will be white, or more commonly, they will be painted the same color as the roof. So in this case, we're pretty sure that we have PVC pipes coming out of the roof, and most probably that's the biggest indicator here in Northeast Dallas that we have a PVC plumbing infrastructure. Now, when checking the plumbing infrastructure, a lot of times you want to look at the water meter. It's a little bit of a hassle. You may have to dig out some dirt, but it's really, really important. So you want to get yourself one of these handy water meter tools. Now, you can get this at Home Depot or wherever, probably order it on Amazon. But what we're going to do is 2 things. Again, we're going to look for an additional check on what type of plumbing infrastructure is. And we're also going to do a quick check to see if there are any leaks in the plumbing. And we're going to do that by going ahead and opening up the water meter here. So I'm going to try to give you a close-up of what's going on here in the water meter. So you can look down here and you can see the water meter here. It's a digital water meter, and right now none of the numbers are running, which means that there's no water running inside the home. And if you look up here, you can see the valve, the main valve to turn on the water for the plumbing system is off. It's running perpendicular to the actual connection to the water meter. So we're going to actually turn the main valve on, and we're going to turn this control gate to be in line with the flow of the pipe. And now the main water is turned on. And now if we switch back and we look at the water meter, none of the faucets in the home and none of the toilets are running right now. But you can see that the digital water meter, the numbers are incrementing. And that's because even without the water turned on in this house, there is a plumbing leak, and it is causing the water meter to run and fill the pipe with water that's being leaked underneath the house. Now, as we check the water meter here in Northeast Dallas and we check the pipeline coming in from the city main water line, you're going to see here that from home to home and from city to city, the water meter may be different. Now, this home in Northeast Dallas, we have an analog water meter as opposed to the digital one that we saw in White Settlement here. So we've already opened up the valve that allows the water to come in from the city, and we have all of the faucets off inside the home. And unlike White Settlement, we're not seeing the meter run. And so there's no water flowing through the system with the faucets off. Now in White Settlement, we had the faucets off, but we were still seeing the water meter running, and that was the indication that we had a leak in the plumbing system. But we're not seeing that here in Northeast Dallas. So now we'll go ahead and turn the faucets on inside the home. We're going to go ahead and turn on the kitchen faucet, and you'll see here that the water meter starts running. And so we know we don't have a plumbing leak, but there's incoming water into the home, so it looks like we're in pretty good shape here with a PVC plumbing infrastructure here in Northeast Dallas. So when doing your property assessment for the plumbing system, not only do you want to look for cast iron pipes, you also want to check and see if the home has clean out drainage pipes on the exterior of the home. Now, it has got to the point that all cities require that all properties have external clean-out systems. And the purpose of the clean-out system is to give plumbers easy access to clean out drainage systems or to clean out the pipes when one, there is a clog in the pipe, or two, if you need to find a plumbing leak, it gives them easy access to run cameras through the plumbing system to find out where those leaks are or where the clogs are. Now, when the home does not have a clean-out system, it's much more difficult to get access to the pipes to do any clean out or to do any camera inspection. If you did not have a clean out system, you would have to do it through one of the sinks in the home or through one of the toilets in the home. And it's much more difficult to do that than if you have clean out pipes in your front yard or in your backyard. Now, the clean out pipes are usually on the same side of the house, either front or back, that your water meter is. And the clean out pipes are just going to be PVC pipes that are sticking up out of the yard, and they're usually 2 to 3 feet in front of the foundation of the exterior front or back of the home. Now, for this house in White Settlement, we looked for the clean out pipes all over the place and we couldn't find them. And we actually had to track down where the sewer line was running, and we actually did a sewer inspection test to make sure that there weren't any clogs in the sewer system. And when we did that sewer inspection test, we found the clean out pipes. They are actually installed, but the previous homeowner had laid some of the driveway over the top of the clean out system. So now we're going to have to install, or whoever rehabs the home in order to get the property up to code is going to have to provide more clean out infrastructure into the drainage system in order to be up to property code. Okay, we got better news for the home in Northeast Dallas related to the clean out system. We were able to easily find the clean out drains here, and you can see here that there are 2 of them. There is one that is used to clean clogs from the house to the city pipeline, and it is always going to be the one that's closest to the home. And then there's another one that's farthest from the home, and it is for the clean out of the plumbing infrastructure going into the house. Now again, the clean outs are primarily for 2 purposes. So you can run an anti-clogging mechanism, or some people call it a rotor-rooter, through the pipe to clean out any clogs, and also so you can run a camera through the plumbing system in order to find out where the leaks are. So the cleanouts are U-shaped, and they're meant for these mechanisms to go in and then go out to the place either toward the house or away from the house. So we're going to save about $3,000, $4,000 here because we don't have to add a cleanout system, as opposed to the one in White Settlement where the cleanouts were basically hidden or poured over from the sidewalk that was added to the driveway. Here we won't have to be able to do anything, and this will easily pass city code. So another big piece of the property infrastructure that you want to do a quick assessment of is the electrical system. Depending on the condition and the position of your electrical system, you can really increase your rehab costs. And there are two primary things you want to look at. Number one, the breaker box, and number two, whether the home has aluminum or copper wiring. Now, we're going to start with the breaker box because there are a few things that you have to look for. Number one, the biggest one is the breaker box in a non-living area. In the late 1980s, they changed the property code to where the breaker box has to be outside of the living area of the home. It can be in the garage and it can be outside of the home, but it can't be in a living space. And in this case, we have the breaker box inside of the living area. It's in one of the bedrooms. And so we're going to have to relocate and eat the cost of relocating this breaker box. And it can run up to $3,000, $4,000 depending on the other things that you need to do to the breaker box. The other thing that you need to look at is whether the breaker box has a main switch. Even if it is outside of the living area, if it does not have a main breaker that will shut off all the electrical systems at the house with one switch, then you're going to have to install that main breaker switch, and it's going to cost you additional money. The other thing is they have begun to frown upon plastic breaker boxes, and they want to see metal breaker boxes. So if you're going to relocate a breaker box, usually you're not going to be able to reuse it, so you probably just want to replace it with a newer model breaker box. And then finally, if your breaker box is not in a non-living area, if it's got a main breaker switch, then you want to just look at the condition of the breaker box. Make sure it doesn't have any exposed wiring, that all of the switches are working, and that it's in overall good condition. And that will tell you whether you need to really invest the cost on the breaker box just to meet property code. And like I said, it can run you $3,000 to $4,000 if it needs to be relocated or if it's in bad shape. So the other quick assessment that you want to do on the electrical system is to determine what type of wiring the home has. It was very common in older homes to have cheaper aluminum wiring, but somewhere along the line the property codes changed because aluminum wiring is much less resistant to fire than copper wiring is. So now all the homes are required to have copper wiring, and related to that, you have to have switches and outlets that support a copper wiring connection. So we looked at the panel previously and there was no exposed wiring, but what you want to do is look for connections to switches that has exposed wiring so you can determine if it's aluminum or copper. In this case, we decided to take off the cover of a light switch, and if you look behind the light switches, you can see the connections of the wiring to the light switch. In this case, it's a little bit hard to see, but we have evidence that we have copper connections, copper wiring that's going to this switch. So we're in good condition here. If it would have been aluminum wiring, then we would have had to change out the pigtails to each of the switches and to each of the electrical outlets, and we would also have to change those receptacles because they don't support copper wiring. If you have to change from aluminum to copper wiring, it can cost you between $2,000 to $3,000 depending on the size and the number of outlets you have in the home. So starting the assessment of the electrical system here in the home in Northeast Dallas, let's go ahead and take a look at the breaker box. And you can see here it's a little bit newer. It's hard to believe because it's in poorer condition, but this breaker box is actually a little bit newer model than the one that we saw in White Settlement. But there are a lot of gaps here. There's a lot of wiring that's shown, and it's mainly because the faceplate here is not centered over it, but this breaker box is not as good as the one that's in White Settlement. You can also see here that it does not have the main breaker switch. We did have a main breaker switch at the one in White Settlement, but the big thing is this. Although it's hard to tell because this is actually the original garage that we're standing in for this home, this breaker box is not in a living area, as opposed to the one in White Settlement where the breaker box was in a living area and it was going to have to be relocated. Our plan plan for this home is that we will go ahead and build out a full garage and reclaim this little space. And so this breaker box is actually going to be in the non-living area of the home. It's going to be in a garage. And so we won't have to relocate it, but we're just going to have to do some repairs. So let's go ahead and take off the faceplate here and see if we can see what type of wiring we have. Do we have copper or aluminum wiring here in Northeast Dallas? So we're not going to pull the faceplate completely off, but you can see here, you can see that the connections we have down in the breaker box are with copper wiring. And so good news on this home as well, we don't have aluminum wiring, so all the switches and all the outlets we hopefully won't have to change out. Looks like we have copper wiring in this home too, so we'll save some rehab expense there. Now before you make an offer, one of the other things that you want to check on is how is the HVAC system operating, or at least visually check how it looks. The HVAC system could be a significant cost driver. Depending on the size of the home, if you had to replace the HVAC, it could be $5,000 to $12,000. Now, for this home in White Settlement, we were able to do a visual check. When you're actually making an offer on the home, a lot of times you don't have enough time to do a detailed HVAC test. So we did a visual check of the one in White Settlement, and we're also just being aware of our surroundings. Although the HVAC did not look all that bad, you could tell that the home was being cooled by a window set air conditioning unit. And that's a telltale sign that if they're using a window unit, your HVAC may not be working. And looking at the HVAC system, it looks like it's a little bit newer than the one that we had in White Settlement. It is actually running. The one in White Settlement was not running, but you can tell by myself I'm sweating right now. It is not cooling the house. So we would probably put a little bit of dollars against the replacement of an AC, and then we would go ahead and have it serviced and see if we could keep it. But we would probably plug some dollars against a replacement for an air conditioning in our initial rehab assessment, just to make sure we have it covered. So the other big cost that you can avoid or you can capture and budget for when you're doing an initial property assessment is foundation problems. And you can do some real quick visual checks to determine whether the foundation has major or minor repairs that are going to need to be done. You can look at cracks in the ceiling, either by the doors or in the baseboards, just cracks, and see if there are any cracks in the interior walls of the home. Also, open and shut doors. If the doors are hard to open or hard to close, then you know that there's probably some unevenness in the foundation. Now for this house here in White Settlement, we looked for cracks on the foundation of the exterior of the home. We looked for evenness in the brick on the exterior of the home. We looked for cracks on the walls and in the ceilings, and it doesn't look like there's many major foundation problems with this house in White Settlement. The only thing that we noted is that when you walk from the living area to the kitchen, it does physically seem like there's a little slant to the home, and without a measurement tool to really determine if there's any unevenness between the living room and the kitchen, it would be difficult to determine. But here's enough that there's enough unevenness that I'm sensing just by walking, that if I were to come in and make an offer on this home to a homeowner and I would do this initial rehab assessment, I would go ahead and set aside $2,000 or $3,000 of risk budget for foundation repairs. But I wouldn't put anything major like replacing a lot of piers that would run into the tens of $12,000 of foundation repair, because in White Settlement it doesn't look like we have that big of a problem. So for an initial foundation check on the home in Northeast Dallas, we're going to go ahead and look at the interior of the home, look at the walls, look at the ceiling. We're not seeing any major cracks. Now over here in the entryway and the fireplace brick, you can see that there's some separation in the painting and in the drywall, and most probably that's not as much a foundation problem as just some settling between the wall and the brick. But we would go ahead and do a more detailed foundation check, and we would go ahead and put some risk dollars out. But we're not seeing any other cracks in the ceiling or in the walls, and as we walk the floor, we're not seeing any really leveling or unevenness in the floor plan. And so right now, just looking at the interior of the home, we're not seeing any major problems in the foundation. So that's a quick overview of how we do an initial rehab assessment when we get to a home right before we make a homeowner an offer on their house. By coming out here and real-time updating our rehab numbers based upon what we quickly see at the home, we're going to give ourselves a much more accurate reflection of what we should pay for the home and what our profit target should be. Now here's the results of this comparison of the two houses that we did. The home in White Settlement, although it's newer and it looks like it's a little bit better condition, it had a lot of hidden surprises. We know we found a cast iron plumbing infrastructure that already has a major leak that's running underneath the house. We also know that we would have to spend money to reconstitute the cleanout system that was hidden underneath the driveway of the home. Also, when we did our electrical system assessment, we found that we would have to relocate the breaker box to a non-living area, and we also found that we would have to replace the HVAC system, most probably, also increasing our costs. So there are a lot of hidden surprises with the home in White Settlement, and our rehab costs would be much more than our rehab costs for the home in Northeast Dallas. So this is what we're going to do. Tomorrow, we're selling the home in White Settlement, and we'll make an anticipated profit between $18,000 and $20,000. And there's a good chance that here in Northeast Dallas, we're going to go ahead and rehab this home and sell it on the retail market. So keep checking back at the channel. If we rehab this house, we'll take you along for the ride. So if you'd like to learn how we flip these houses for big profit here in Dallas, Fort Worth, real investors doing real deals, providing real inside the deal education, come check us out at letsgetpaid.com and register for our next free webinar. You can learn how you can start making immediate income as a real estate investor here in Dallas and start a life of freedom by owning your own real estate business. Come check us out at our next live webinar. Until we meet you in person or until the next video, I'm Michael Williams, and as always, hey, let's get paid.
Let's get paid.